Wenceslaw Simiu, and I'll be taking you through this session today. All right, so now when you're talking about native applications, then we're just basically referring to the capability to build on your own platforms. And the ArcGIS Runtime API is actually a very powerful, modern and scalable, for thinking API that is actually designed to make it easy to build great applications that now leverage ArcGIS, and the device that you're running the application on. And this session now will present an introduction to the same, all right? An introduction to the ArcGIS Runtime SDKs, some of the advantages of using these SDKs, and now an overview of the API. And this session is ideal for developers, who are new to the ArcGIS Runtime, also the managers and program managers, evaluating the technology. And remember, we've done introductory sessions, like 2 other sessions on the same, and you can find those on our YouTube channels. So in case there's anything that is unclear for you, you can actually find it in the other introductory videos where we talk about the ArcGIS for developers and how you can get to utilize the runtime SDKs as well, right? So now, just to start us off, when you talk about ArcGIS, then it's composed of 4 main parts. We have the ArcGIS Online, that is our software as a service, which comes with several applications. And we have ArcGIS Pro, which is now the desktop software that can be used by GIS analysts. And then now we have the ArcGIS Enterprise for those who have a server, then this is their server software. It is actually used to host the geospatial data, services, and analytics within a customer's infrastructure. So depending with whatever you want to do, you can actually choose in between our software as a service, which is ArcGIS Online, or the server software, which is ArcGIS Enterprise, to which you can actually customize and have it on your own premise. So all this is connected in the gateway, all right, and in the one ecosystem that has all these components of location services and content. And then underpinning all these other parts, now we have the ArcGIS Platform, which is our platform as a service offering, right? So now we offer to you a platform as a service so that you can be able to manipulate some of these services and utilize them in your own applications. You can actually get to create your own, and the limitation here just becomes your imagination. So ArcGIS Platform is really where all these components lie, and we can just look at it a little bit more, and it's actually designed for developers, and it includes the locational services that now contain content or host capabilities, such as now the base maps, geocoding, routing, demographic data, and so on. And then also the ability for developers to host their data and content. Remember, when you're talking about ArcGIS Platform, ArcGIS System, we're talking about something that has this one ecosystem where you can have all your content and services. And even when you're talking about development of applications, then keep this at the back of your mind, that you can actually, rely on the same ecosystem and, get some components like services and so on, some RESTful APIs from the same, and utilize them in your applications, right? So we have a set of app builders, to create web and native applications easily. And you actually, if you look at our previous videos, then you'll actually see we've looked at App Studio for ArcGIS, which helps you to build across all platforms and so on. And APIs for developers to build automation solutions are also available. We're talking about web applications, and you can also interact with the services through open source, or RESTful APIs. And for this session, we're now going to focus on the ArcGIS Runtime SDKs to build native mapping applications, which you can also do. And just remember that when you talk about supporting some of the, open source, like OpenLayer, Leaflet, and so on, this is just to encourage you that even if you're on another platform, or even if you are enjoying the service of another platform, then you can still, integrate with ArcGIS, as now it is really supporting a lot of those developments. And now when you talk about ArcGIS runtime building, native applications, we must ask ourselves, like, what are some of the, valuable and unique things within the ArcGIS system? What is ArcGIS runtime? And what are some of these, valuable and unique things within the ArcGIS system as part of the ArcGIS platforms, right? And now we get to see that developers can use the runtime SDKs to now add the visualization and geospatial capabilities to their native applications. And this, in a way, kind of empowers now the users to use all these location intelligence kind of components, from a simple map display, like, displaying the map of Kenya, all the way to navigation, to like finding a route from this place to another. In our demonstration shortly, we'll actually we'll actually see an example of a directions widget, which now shows you how easy it is to get, the walking time and so on. And some of this editing and sharing of geographic data as well. And when you're talking about the ArcGIS runtime, then we're actually saying that because it's built on the native technology, then runtime can take advantage of the GPUs and device resources to deliver very high performance, high fidelity, 2D and 3D mapping experiences. And some of these runtime APIs then are now refined to give developers now the tools that they need to build solutions for simple and even the sophisticated workflows. Because you can have an application that displays a map, and you can have an application that, for instance, like Uber and so on, that still leverage on the same architecture, but are very, sophisticated. And runtime not only supports now the local access to a wide variety of vector and raster data, but it also takes advantage of some of the tools that we've been talking about and the services that are within now the ArcGIS ecosystem. So when you're running your things, or when you're running your apps, then you keep in mind that all these are actually supported. And of course, when you talk about supporting, multiple platforms, then you keep in mind that they can integrate with the most popular developer environments. So our users now, who are you, the target audience, who are mainly developers or people influencing development in your various capacities, then you can use your programming language of choice, and deliver applications that target both desktop and mobile operating systems, with confidence that this will actually work seamlessly and also work efficiently, because you're using the local kind of architectures. And now when you're talking about the runtime SDKs that integrate with the ArcGIS system, then we're actually going back to the ecosystem, and you'll realize I've actually mentioned this word so many times, and we know that, it includes ready, ArcGIS system includes ready to use data and services, and provides very powerful tools to create, manage, stylize, host, secure geographic data, maps, and many other workflows that you may think about. So maybe the most important thing then you'd ask yourself is, why would you build, native applications? Because one thing that you can actually note is, even with the web technology being advanced every other time, then you'll actually know that there's very much developments and amazing web technology available today. And you can build very highly functional, rich web applications that can also perform great on mobile, devices or desktops. So why deal with all this extra complexity? Why go out of your way and learn this object-oriented programming, for native applications like Java for Android, .NET maybe for your Windows desktop applications? So why go the extra mile, And according to the feedback that, as we've gotten from our clients, then native SDKs allow you to get closest to the hardware, the hardware that you're running on, and ultimately that will get you, the best performance for your applications. And another notable benefit is, the ability to debug advanced scenarios and workflows with rich developer tooling. Even as I was preparing one of the demonstrations that we'll see later, I was actually testing an Android application and something was not working. And the debugging part could not be possible if I was using, for instance, Sandbox on the web, right? It was actually very possible for me because I was using the latest Android, Android Studio technology to run and debug, and that was really easy for me. Even for iOS, sometimes you want to use Xcode, depending with what you're developing. So the best debugging experience for sure, offline use, of data and analytics. When you publish your applications, for instance, to online versions like Google Play, how do you get your analytics? Is it based off the web or is it based off the devices? You'll actually realize that this is actually based off the devices. Now, when I talk about ArcGIS Runtime SDKs and platforms, what are some of the SDKs and platforms available today? As of today, we deliver SDKs for Android, iOS, Java, Qt. Okay, I hope you can hear me. All right, so I'll just reshare my screen again. All right, just give me a minute to just. I hope you can see my screen and hear me clearly. Sorry for that technical hitch. I'll just continue from the ArcGIS Runtime SDK and platforms. So as I was saying, the runtime functionality is actually designed, to be equivalent across all APIs and all the platforms. And how are we able to deliver this consistency and high performance across all runtime SDKs? Almost all the business logic in ArcGIS Runtime is implemented inside the C++ model. This is what we refer to as the runtime core. And the code that is compiled on the several architectures, be it the 32-bit, 64-bit, the ARM 64, we use very we have heavy use of the graphic cards for rendering, leveraging the DirectX, OpenGL, OpenGL ES and Metal, and we compile this C++ runtime core, then we target the operating systems that are listed here. So you'll actually realize that, on top of our runtime core, we actually provided a very consistent and common API that each native API within our runtime SDKs then uses to deliver a consistent and natural developer experience. So if you're an Android developer, for instance, and you're using ArcGIS Runtime for Android, then the runtime is going to look and feel like a native Android API. And the developer experience, is not going to look like the C++ API that we use on the backend. But the most important thing is now to stress that when you look at this diagram, you don't pick an API based on performance, but rather all the APIs perform very well because almost all the work is being done at the C++ level. Then it's just being compiled down to the native code, which is now executing on the appropriate architecture. So as I said earlier on now, when you're talking about the different, when talking about the different architectures, then definitely, or rather the ecosystem, then we're talking about layers and services being the foundation of how we publish most of our components, most of our data, and most of the information that we have that we want to relay out there. So basically, we actually start off by simply creating a map or something on, on ArcGIS Desktop, for instance, publish it to ArcGIS Online as a web service or as a map layer or as a feature service, and then create a web map from the same. The map can have a couple of layers, and this can include now the feature layers, raster layers, the map image layers, the tile layers, and so on. The scene layers, and now once you have these layers, then you can actually now work on the same layers, but from local sources. And there are very many ways of converting this into local layers. For instance, now tile layers, vector tile layers, scene layers. So let's assume you want to create an application that will work well in an area where there's totally no network, right? You can actually create a vector tile layer, right? Or you can even create a mobile map package that has these layers and then take them offline. And now when you go to the field, you just use your application to consume the same components. We're actually going to see how best we work with this. And in order to work with your applications well, then maps are very necessary. And these actually define how layers are organized and presented in 2D, right? That is the basic foundation. And when you share this to the portal, it now becomes a web map. And from ArcGIS Pro, as I've told you, you can actually, from ArcGIS Desktop, you can create your mobile map package, which now becomes a tile layer. I believe we can actually just briefly look at an example of how we do this real time, in code, so that I can even demonstrate some of these components that I'm referring to, in the presentation. So what you're seeing on your screen is a very simple JavaScript example of how we utilize the code. And I'll actually just explain what is happening here, and then I'll go to Android, and you can actually see some of the main similarities and so on. So if you develop with HTML, then, or rather with JavaScript, then you actually know that the first thing you can do is just set up a basic, HTML document that is similar to this example, having the HTML head and so on. And then inside the head, you actually realize that you need to make sure you're actually calling the ArcGIS for JavaScript API, and this is called here, right? So this script is very important, and you update this number based on the version that is utilized. So the JavaScript API is called in this script here, and you can actually see that now you introduce the modules where you're saying you'll require to add the map module, and you'll require to add the map view module. You'll realize that these are actually clickable, and you can be able to, these are very clickable, and you can be able to see even much more on the API reference. So for instance, when you're extending the application, when you're doing more using your own components, then it's easier for you to understand our API, from the API references. And from there, now you can be able to adjust it accordingly. So you realize that you'll actually say that you need a map and you need a map view, because the map view becomes the container where you'll place this, all right? So now after that, you need to create the map, and you're actually seeing where we're creating our map here, right? We're saying that the map will have a base map, which will be, the street vector. And we're actually also determining that we're creating a 2D map, and the view is referencing now the containers, right, in the HTML that you can actually see here, we're using view div and so on. And you're saying this map will zoom to the level of 6 and the center will be, we've used some latitude, longitude and latitude that is of, the area Kenya. You can actually adjust this depending with your needs or depending with what you want to demonstrate. But that's just a very simple way of how you can do. You can create an application, and when you come here and you actually see, we have actually put the styles, the various styles that are necessary, because on our web, that is how best you go about it. So if you do this, or rather, if I change this to maybe 36, then refresh, you'll be able to see that it goes to a very different area, right? So just so on and so forth. So depending with how you zoom, you can actually change this zoom to something like 20 to just get maybe a very significant change on what you're viewing on our screens. And I believe maybe 20 has gone a little bit too far. So maybe we can say something like 15 and refresh to just see, how far this zooms. And we can go back to the area Kenya and just refresh that. And you can actually see that we're now on a certain road here. And if you zoom out, then you'll actually see exactly where we are. So this is just a very simple overview of how simple it is to apply the code of displaying a map. And when we come here now, we actually get to see a layer. But before we go to this layer, I'd like to show you the map component on Android, right? So let's just look at a similar application on the Runtime SDK for Android. So how do we go about creating such an application on an Android device? So you'll see that I've imported the necessary components that I require, and here definitely I've set up my Android Studio to actually utilize the Esri SDK for Android, and this is actually very much accessible and available on our ArcGIS for Developers platform. And when you go to our YouTube video, which we did as well back in last year, sometime in last year, we actually explained step by step how you can access some of these initial steps of setting up your Android project to consume some of these components. And you actually see that here, the first thing that we do is we determine or declare the authentication. And if you don't do this, then the map will not be able to load. So you can do this through the authentication that we provide, right? You can do this through the API keys. You can do this through the license keys that we provide, depending on how you want to go about it. All the guides to how to do this is available. So you realize that here I'm actually just declaring the first thing I've done is I've declared a map view because I want to put my map inside the map view. So I've declared my map view here, and then you can actually see that here I've initiated my map view and, connected it or linked it up with this class which I've created, which if I go to, then this is how I've declared my map view container. So this is actually the same to what you're seeing on JavaScript, where we had the container, and now here you're seeing that the map view will actually just go in there. And now I've said my base map can be ArcGIS, streets. And for the base map, I can change it or alternate it depending with what I want, or rather what my application is about, and so on. And you can see that I've gone ahead now to set the map, whose base map I've declared to now be what is appearing on my map view, or rather the container. And then I've gone ahead to set the viewpoint, or where now the map will actually zoom to. So if I run this on my emulator, then you should be able to see my application loading here. This may take some time because of internet, but now I'm glad it is now loaded. You can actually see this is the map application that I've actually loaded, and it's very simple. And this, you can see, is very different from what you were seeing on JavaScript, because this is very friendly to an Android developer. This is actually going with the syntax which I use. So as I was explaining earlier, then you can't see the C++ core runtime that we're utilizing, because you actually have your own interface where you're now building based on your Android capabilities and components. So you can actually be able to see the simple application that I've loaded. And we'll come back to this when we'll now discuss briefly about the layers, and we'll actually see even how it's possible to add the layers. And allow me to just briefly talk about, some of the offline maps that we have. We can actually, author them from a web map and, from the enterprise and so on from the desktop. But now when you do it from the code, then it gives you a lot of flexibility. For instance, now when you're calling the service, then it becomes, very flexible for you. And when we're talking about layers, remember now I was loading, the map view container. I was loading it with a map. And as you saw, that was just a base map. So how can we be able to add a layer, be it a feature layer, raster layer, map image layer, or even tiled layer for that matter? So how can we be able to load our layers on the, on the map? So let me just take you through the scenes, and then we'll go through a demonstration that will show how to work with the layers and also how to work with the scenes, or rather with the 3D components. So now scenes have become, a very integral part of what we do in our day-to-day, and many people are dealing with 3D data. So there are ways in which you can also load 3D data in your applications. There are ways in which you can actually utilize the same, and you can even take them, to offline mode, like the mobile scene package, but that will actually consume a lot of space. So you also have to, take note of that. And when you're talking about 3D components, of course, you're looking at things like buildings, which can really come in handy, which 3D data can really come in handy for, and so on. So we're talking about surfaces, you're talking about features, extrusion, the different model symbols, and so on. So let me just take you briefly through a demonstration of the layers that I was actually talking about. So if we come here, and we can actually see on our code now, we've been able to add some more elements. This is the JavaScript code. You can actually see that we've been able to add, among the modules that are required, we've added the feature layer, right? So we have the map that was also in the other component. We have the map view that was also in the other component, and you can see now we've added the feature layer. And for the base map, we said we want, the hybrid, imagery. This is the imagery that has the labels, all right? And in our feature layer, we are using this link. That is the service link to our feature service that is published on ArcGIS Online. You may wonder, how do we get this link? Because if you click this link, it will bring you to this page. This is actually where you can actually get your ArcGIS REST services, all right? This is your ArcGIS REST services directory, where you can actually get all your data. You can get now your JSON format, which you can now utilize in your various applications. And how do you get here, right? I'll show you a very simple example of something on my ArcGIS Online. This is something I've published from ArcGIS Pro, and it's now on ArcGIS Online. So how do I get the same link? You just simply come down here. So make sure you share your application. For a public application, of course, you want to share it with the public, and then come down here to the URL, and just copy this URL. And if you look at this URL, it's ending with, the feature server. So if you copy this URL and open it in another tab, and just add, stroke 0, because you're adding the index of the first, probably the first layer of this map service, all right? And now you get this. And if you get this, then you can utilize it in your application as you wish, all right? And we're going to now, in our Android application, we are going to actually utilize this, which I published myself, which is an example in the Kenyan space. All right, so if I come here to now Android Studio, if I want to add my code, I just commented some code here, which I'd already added because of time. So right here, you can actually see that I'm declaring, my feature service table, I'm, creating the, the feature service table and declaring it, and then I'm instantiating it, and I add here the URL that I received from my ArcGIS online service, right? So for instance, here now, when you go to this string here, you'll actually see that I've just taken my URL, I've named it the sample service URL, and this is the URL that I actually copied. You'll realize this is the URL that I copied from the web. This is the URL that I've just shown you. So now in our code, I'm just declaring, I'm instantiating the service feature table here. Now I'm saying this feature layer that I'm calling, I want to create the feature layer, and I want to utilize the table that I've declared up here. And this table should read the data from now the JSON that comes from the link that I've shared. And I should say, I want to add all the operational layers to my map. And once I do this, then I want all these operational layers to appear. So let's just go back to our emulator right here. You can see this is the map as it appears on our application. Now I've added this set of code, and if I just rerun, this, I'll just terminate what exists. If I rerun this, then it should be able to load the feature service, and this, you can actually now see this now appear, all right? This now come in on my map. And remember, you can now add more components like this. These are all national, these are some of the national parks and reserves in Kenya. You can add functionalities to click, on these features and so on. And remember, this is an Android application that I'm actually building on an iOS, on a macOS platform. So just one of the tips and tricks that I would like to share is you can actually come and run this as well, pair devices using Wi-Fi. And if you do this, then you can actually, the only disadvantage here is that you have to have Android 11 and 12, but you can come here and scan the QR code and also see this from your native device, or rather from your physical device. And this even shows you, for instance, if you want to use an external, GPS, for instance, to get even an accurate location for your application, then how do you even test that even further, right? So this is a very good trick that you can actually utilize right now. And once you do this, then it becomes similar to you attaching your USB directly to your laptop and running the code. So I hope that really explains how we've utilized the feature layers in our map applications as well. And when you're talking about 3D, allow me to show you, a scene now, a scene on the JavaScript side, whereby now when you're utilizing your code, then you can actually see that we've now declared under our module, we've actually declared the scene view as our main module of choice here. And remember, you can play around with some of these components, and it's very easy to edit this code. And you can also download it to your device and run it locally, even in your local host. Just put it in your local host if necessary and run it there. So it doesn't really matter what you want to do, but it's really rather simple for you to just approach it from that angle. Let me just copy this coordinates here and see how this loads, on our scene view, on our 3D view, right? So if I just come here and, refresh this, then you should be able to see real time, that this has now zoomed in, and you can actually see the central part there is Kenya. So I'll just try and put 200 here, and let's see how far we go, right? You can actually see we have the scene view element still. You can see the 3D element, but it's really zoomed into the Kenyan region because I provided, the central area coordinates to be the Kenyan region. So that's how you can start off using the scene, or rather the scene views, but there's so much resources that you can actually utilize to enable you to do a couple of other components and so on. And before I even talk about some components of analysis, then just allow me to probably take you through some of the things that actually available. So the most important thing that you would actually want to achieve when you're utilizing some of these many SDKs that we provide for you is a real life kind of solution that you can actually give to people and say that you can actually use this application to do A, B, C, D. And that's where analysis comes in, because we provide geoprocessing services, network services, geocoding services, the utility network services, and so on. And, we have a couple of free for use services before billing begins. And I'll actually share that briefly as we finish towards the end. We're actually almost coming to the end, but I'll share towards the end briefly some of those components. So now, when you're looking at some of these components, then you're looking at, of course, the interactive 3D analysis, the viewshed and so on. And you can actually see on your screen right now, there's an analysis here taking place. And you can actually see that if you look keenly, then you can actually do some GIS analysis already from where you're sitting. And you can actually see that there's some hotspot analysis kind of taking place here. And how do you visualize this real time? How do you create applications that can actually bring you, to such components? So we'll just look at a short demonstration, then come back to to look at the licenses and so on. So for now, just allow me to probably just take you through a very simple and quick application. Then we can then go on and talk about some of the licenses that we have available. So this is a very simple widget that is made available to you. And remember that I'm utilizing the JavaScript to just show you what is possible to cut across all the runtime SDKs. And that's why I even took you through Android. And you can do this in iOS, you can do this in all components. The idea is to show you that this is what is provided to you. And now you can, add on top of this. So if you have your running application, you can simply come here and even add this widget as it is to one of your divs. If you're working on, for instance, a web application. And if you come here, you'll actually see that right here under the modules, we've added the widgets, for directions. And you can even click to see the API reference and see what was utilized to build this and so on. And now you can see I've changed my base map to another type that I want. I've said my center will be that. So this is a very simple widget. And for instance, if I just come here and say, I want to utilize my my current location. If that doesn't work, then I'll just type it in. I can just type it as Eastern Africa, so that we search for this specific application, this specific location, and say that we want to go to the Nairobi CBD area, right? So if I want to go to probably the Nairobi, Kenya. So this should be able, although it will take, it takes a few minutes to just load, this should be able to give me already a couple of very important elements. And if I zoom out, I can be able to see that this route has actually been done for me, right? And you can actually be able to see, for instance, if I come here and say walking time, I can actually get some components like how long it will take me, 36 minutes probably, and so on. This is 3 kilometers. So sometimes most of our employees work from, the office to town. So this will be very applicable for them. So if you can actually just create a simple application, and before someone leaves the office, they can even just click on the widget and just check for the same. So this is a real life these are real life examples that shows you how you can do that. Now, to just show you the same code on Android, or rather on a native SDK for Android, you can actually see that this is actually very much available. And there's a step-by-step code to actually do this. You can actually see you declare your tile layer, set your map and so on. Have the, some of the buttons that are available, and so on. So we may not do this practically now because of time and so on. But of course, you can always reach out to us if you're doing such solutions, and we can definitely help you to achieve or unlock some of these elements. And remember, most of these materials are very much available, and we'll even be sharing more as a follow-up email to the people registered for this webinar. We'll actually be sharing a couple of links in form of documentation to most of the links that I've actually utilized in these presentations and even more. All right, so briefly, maybe just before I even go back to the presentation, I can just show you another trick. Once you're on this page here, or rather once you're on ArcGIS for Developers page, and you've come to, for instance, ArcGIS Runtime for Android, you can actually get to see all the applications that are actually available here. And what's even more intriguing is that you can actually come here to the sample code and select if you want to utilize Java or Kotlin. And this cuts across all the applications. If you're using iOS, are you using Swift? Are you using Object-C? All right. So these are some of the elements that when you look at, for instance, I click on Java, you come to this page, and you can even now view on GitHub all the resources, and you'll actually be able to get, for instance, this is an example on the example that I've shown you on GitHub, but you can even click on GitHub and just see all the codes that are given by Esri. You can actually get all of them here. You can fork this and use them, in your own application. So you can come here and watch some of the updates that we're actually making. As I've said, you can actually come here and fork the same and utilize it in your own components. So those are just some of the tricks that when you want to get by some of these resources easily, then that becomes something that may really come in handy for you. So just going back to our presentation, then we're looking at some of the licenses and licenses levels and extensions that we have, and we have the light, basic, standard, and advanced, and this really vary depending with your needs. And the best thing that I would say is that once you want to now build your applications, be it that you're an individual or you're in a company, and so on, first of all, go and read more about how these licenses are based, or rather how these licenses are determined. And you can see the basic allows editing, and navigation features. The standard has the additional local data sources and so on. And now with the ArcGIS platform, you'll actually figure that you have the different levels, be it builder, professional, premium, and enterprise. And if you're a corporate, for instance, you have to look here and see what works best for you. How many people do you have working in your organization? How many solutions are you building? What is the capacity, of the solution that you're building? And that really informs some of the components that you utilize when you're doing, your development. And just maybe to finalize, I can actually just finalize by showing you briefly on the web, right? The different ArcGIS for developers. I can actually show you some of the different components in terms of pricing. And this is the ArcGIS platform pricing model that is actually very much available to you. You can actually access this and see, as I referenced earlier, you can actually see that, for instance, if you're using geocoding components, then you can actually utilize to some extent, 20,000 geocodes. And this is really a large number. You can actually utilize this for free. And then from there, now you can start getting your charges, where probably now you'll actually be making profit on your applications and so on. So first of all, we give you the ability to test extensively, to utilize our applications and services extensively before now we start giving you a plan to which you can actually follow and so on. And of course, you can actually always build different applications, and this is what I shared. So depending with what you want to achieve, then you can always reach out to us, and we can always give you the best advice on what to take up. So having said all that, I believe we can end our presentation there. And in case there's any question that has not been handled, then perhaps I can handle, but I'm sure my able colleagues, Sydney, in the chat have been answering, and Sydney and Lydia have definitely been responding to most of your questions. So